Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Xiaohui, and this is my presentation of my paper, Compensation Goals and Real Earnings Management, Evidence from Meeting EPS and Sales Target. This presentation is organized in 4 parts. Firstly, I'm going to tell you something about the related literatures and background, how we construct the particular hypothesis. The second part is about methodology. In this part, I will mention resources of data and data gathering procedures, and how I constructed the research design. Thirdly, I would like to look at the overall results of main tests and a bunch of subsample analysis. And finally, I will talk about contributions and explain why it is an interesting topic in particular. It will take no more than 20 minutes to finish this presentation, and hopefully there will be time for questions at the end of this presentation. Our paper is mostly closely related to the prior literature that studies managers face significant pressure to achieve the performance goals specified in the compensation contracts. For example, in the very beginning, Healy 1985 found managers manipulate earnings to achieve minimal bonus or maximal bonus by using accrual-based management. Kim and N 2018 reinvested Yang and Yang 2011. They provide further evidence under the EPS-based bonus contracts. Managers are more likely to increase EPS through share repurchase or spending more on share repurchase when raw EPS is very close to but just below the threshold and the target. All in all, based on the bonus maximization hypothesis, it is not surprising that managers face significant pressure to achieve its performance goals in the compensation contracts. What I want to mention here is, yes, there are typically 3 performance goals in the compensation contracts, but managers or executives place different weighting on different goals. For threshold, there usually is a jump from nothing in pay at the threshold. For target, firms whose performance clusters around the target are more likely to meet the target in the next period, and CEOs who miss their performance target are more likely to be forced out. For maximum, managers may not want to exceed the target performance by a large amount, because the better performance this period results in higher targets in the subsequent periods. That is, managers do not really want to exceed the maximum. We call this a racketing effect. The incentives for managers to meet the target is more stronger than others, at least stronger than meeting maximum. And that is the reason why in most of the analysis, we focus on meeting the target. The second set of literature is about how executives manage performance to meet or beat pre-established performance goals. Survey evidence reported by Graham et al. 2005 for a sample of over 400 financial executives, 80% of whom indicated that they would consider reducing R&D to meet an external earnings target from investors' perspectives. Bennett et al. 2016 and briefly mentioned that in case of EPS goals, managers can cut discretionary expenditures such as R&D and SG&A. Managers can manage their sales goals by increasing SG&A and accounting receivables. However, the focus of their paper is about using regression design discontinuity to see whether performance clusters around the target level. Although there are many studies focused on compensation contracts characteristics, for example, the performance measures, in other words, metrics such as EPS, sales revenue, and operating income. It is so important to know where the boundary between current knowledge and omittance. The complex compensation data is not disclosed until 2006 because a new section titled Compensation Discussion and Analysis require companies to disclose the overall compensation objects, performance measures, and compensation structures. A number of companies also disclose the threshold, target, and maximum since then. This new disclosure gives us a unique opportunity to look at some of the characteristics didn't receive much attention before. For example, the contract have multiple measures or just simply rely on a single one. Whether the measure is the most important one or just occupy a relatively small percentage. These are the focus of our paper, which leads to two sets of hypotheses. HA1 is managers are more likely to cut R&D to just meet EPS target when EPS is the most important criterion used in their compensation contracts. We also use cut SG&A to replace R&D in H1B to look whether R&D and SG&A are equally important. H2A is managers are not likely to manage R&D to just meet sales target when sales are the most important criterion used in their compensation contracts. It is a little bit different because sales revenue does not directly affected by the R&D expense, so we expect there is no such relationship. And H2B is managers are more likely to increase SG&A to just meet sales target when sales are the most important criteria used in their compensation contracts. I'd now like to move on to research design. We obtain data on performance goals from ISS Incentive Lab, and we obtain financial data from CompuStat. We carefully match ISS and CompuStat using CIK and fiscal year. Table 1 provides the summary characteristics of the compensation contracts in details. As we can see, most of the firm's compensation is tied to multiple metrics, and the majority of more than 80% companies use no more than 3 metrics to assign the compensation. As in panel D, a single EPS is the most commonly used criterion in the compensation contracts, with about 5.5% of managers with compensation are fully tied to a EPS goal. Sales criterion is more likely to be used in combination with other metrics. For example, it can combine with EPS, operating income, and EBITDA. We test H1 by estimating the models that extends both 2016 and Gaussian 2010. First, to construct the dependent variable, I use abnormal R&D and abnormal SG&A to proxy for cutting discretionary expense. We first have the equation to meet the normal level of R&D expense. Residuals represents for the abnormal expense. I create an indicator variable that measures whether the firm has a cut in discretionary expense. Specifically, all cut R&D is equal to 1 if abnormal R&D is negative, and 0 otherwise. All cut SG&A is equal to 1 if abnormal SG&A is negative and 0 otherwise. Variables we are interested in is just meet EPS target. It is an indicator variable equals 1 if the managers with the realized EPS within 15% above the EPS target and 0 otherwise. Dummy key EPS is also an indicator variable that equals to 1 if more than 50% of the compensation is tied to EPS and 0 otherwise. HA1 predicts that managers are more likely to cut R&D expense to just meet the EPS target when EPS is the most important criterion. The coefficient on the interaction term gamma 6 measures the incremental relation between just meeting EPS target and R&D cutting, as EPS is a key criterion. The sum of coefficients on the main and the interaction effects, that is, gamma 2 plus gamma 6, measures the relation between cutting R&D and just meeting EPS target when EPS is a key metric. We expected positive coefficients of gamma 6 and gamma 2 plus gamma 6. To test H1B, we replace all cut R&D with all cut SG&A. The results from the estimation of Model 1 are presented in column 1 of Table 3. This table shows you all cut R&D is positively associated with interaction term, suggesting that there is a difference between firms using EPS as a key metric and firms without using EPS as a key metric in how they manage R&D expense to beat the EPS target. Further, the overall relation between just meeting EPS target and cutting R&D expenditure among firms using EPS as the most important criterion become more likely, as measured by the sum of coefficients on just meet target and on the interaction between just meet target and dummy key. The sum of the coefficients is positive and significant. Again, the result is consistent with HA1 that managers are more likely to cut R&D to just meet their EPS target when EPS is used as a key criterion in the compensation contract. Similarly, results in Table 4 suggest managers are more likely to increase SG&A expense to boost the current sales revenue in order to just meet the sales target when sales are the most criterion in the compensation contracts. I'd now like to move on to a subsample analysis. We also covered a bunch of subsample analysis for our main results. For example, whether the above findings are more pronounced for high ratio of executive bonus relative to total compensation, and whether the above findings are more pronounced for firms with no more than 3 metrics. As we mentioned in Table 1, majority of firms have no more than 3 metrics. Here are the results of subsample analysis. Some of these preconditions play an important role in motivating real earnings management, and most of the results confirm our prediction. For different methods to distinguish between high and low bonus subsample, the results are consistently larger and more significant in the high bonus subsample than in the low bonus subsample. That is, managers are more likely to cut R&D to just meet the EPS target when the EPS is a key metric in high bonus subsample. Managers are more likely to cut R&D to just meet the EPS target when the EPS is a key metric among firms with no more than 3 metrics. Managers being more likely to cut R&D to meet EPS target when EPS is a key metric in high benefit subsample than in low benefit subsample. And managers are more likely to manage R&D or SG&A to just meet EPS or just meet sales target when the firm has relatively low internal governance effectiveness. We also do the following tests. For example, for EPS-based compensation, whether managers are more likely to cut R&D in firms when sales is a secondary metric used in the contract. On the other hand, for sales-based compensation, whether managers are more likely to increase SG&A when EPS is a secondary metric. What happens if EPS and sales are of equal importance? These untabulated results are not consistent with our prediction. It is notable that most profit-related performance, for example, operating income, EBIT, and EBITDA, they can be affected once EPS took a slight dip after manipulating SG&A or R&D. We also find there are some, though less significant evidence that the high weights are given to other profit-related bonus metrics. Managers more likely to cut SG&A expenditure to achieve the target bonus attached to them. At last, I'd like to turn to the contribution of this paper. Our paper provides important insights about the importance of design characteristics of executive compensation contracts to motivate managers' real operating decisions. It contributes to the literature on earnings management. Previous studies focused on earnings management is driven by different primary benchmarks, such as their earnings, last year earnings, and analyst forecast. To the best of my knowledge, little comparable evidence exists for the relation between discretionary real manipulation and internal goals in contracts. I add to the extant literature by examining the role of compensation characteristics. I mean the performance measures and performance goals. I examine the role of compensation characteristics in managing R&D and SG&A. Second, it contributes to the literature on executive bonus contracts by emphasizing on performance contingent compensation, the specific weighting for each metric, and existence of multiple metrics. That is all for today's presentation. Thank you for listening, and if there are some questions, I would be pleased to answer them.